We're glad you're with us this morning. Before the recording, we played some music and some thoughts. We had some fun with a couple of memes. Showed a, a, a guy saying, "Not broke, I'm pre-rich." Another guy saying, "You're broke, huh? Show me your new tattoo again." And the old lady saying, "I don't have any money. Oh wait, I'm not logged on," which really epitomizes the experiences of so many of our leads and our guests. I was one of those that when I heard what it was going to cost to become part of this group, I thought, oh, that's a lot of money. How will I ever come up with that much money? Well, by cracky, I had it. They showed me that I really did have it already. We live in America, folks. If folks think they're poor, it's time to change the way they think and then watch their lives change for the better. We live in the USA, and in the heart of America is a place called Centerville, Utah, and that's where Renatus is putting together opportunities for everybody in our country. If they're just open your eyes and see them, right? And that's what we get to do. We get to bring this message to people and change their lives. It is just so fulfilling. And today we've got, for our instructor, Mr. Christian Sadler, here's a guy I still think that a movie of his life would be most illuminating, most enjoyable, and inspiring. He didn't buy into the "I'm so broke" thing. He didn't buy into the you've got to get good grades, and if you don't, you're a failure, and you have to work for 40 years for 40 plus hours a week to retire on just a fraction of the salary. He said, "I'm going to make this better." He knew he lives in America. He grabbed the opportunity by the bootstraps, and it didn't come to him easy. It didn't come the first time. It didn't come the second time, but he hung in there, and look at him today. He is not living a poor lifestyle. He is traveling around the world. He is inspiring people all over the country, and we're so glad to have him with us today. Christian, how are you?
I'm great, Ron. How about you?
Fantastic.
Good to hear. Hey, I just want to thank you again for everything that you do and for always being here and getting these calls started off. It's really great. We appreciate it, and everything you do behind the scenes as well, because I know it's not just, waking up and getting these calls started. It's, the downloading of the calls and the uploading of the calls, and all those things. Uh-oh, getting a little feedback. Am I coming through okay?
Yeah, I
Yep,
don't hear
fine.
any echoes or feedback at all, Christian.
Okay, no problem then. So thank you, Ron, again, just for everything that you do. And folks, let's jump into things. And I'll correct Ron a little bit on the fact that I did buy into the story of being broke for a long period of time in my life. And you know what? I'm grateful that when I came to this community, that I happened to connect with people who didn't buy my story too, because if they would have bought my story, they would have only reinforced it. And this is part of what I need to bring to you guys today, because I feel like it's a message that so many people are needing. And so I gotta stop video. So as you guys are coming on the line, folks, just remember, don't turn your video on, because it actually will automatically log you on without your video on. So it actually takes you clicking on your own video for you to put that on. And that just interrupts the flow, because we're trying to continually monitor that. We don't necessarily want to see you on the toilet or on your treadmill or whatever you're doing this morning. So as you come on the line, go ahead and make sure yourself is muted, and no need to turn your video on for these calls. All right, let's talk about this story. And I think that rather than trying to write it out, I just want to have the conversation with you. So I'm just going to leave the screen as it is. I'm not going to share here, because the message is what's most important here. And I got to be open with the fact that this is really coming from a presentation that I was at yesterday. So I'm a part of, here in Utah, what's called the Mentor Association. And so it's a group of people that get together that are all mentors and coaches and whatnot in different industries. So that could be health, fitness, obviously with me, finance and real estate investing. And the guy who runs it was sharing about how often he in the past had ripped people off by buying their story. And it always comes from the thought of wanting to help. And so you probably have people in your life that have come to you and you think, man, do they need this opportunity, right? They are in such a tough spot. They've had, such hard times. And man, if I could just maybe buy them their education, man, maybe if I could just, get them in and just, make sure that they just have to spend as little as possible. And here's what I want to help you understand. If you buy their story, you reinforce it. So when people come to you and they say, you know what, I just don't have the money. I just don't have any money. There's no way for me to come up with the funds to get started. If you believe them, if you buy that story, if you reinforce it, then you are giving them permission to stay broke. And I think back to, and I'm glad that I got this lesson prior to me learning it the hard way, even though I have a little bit learned it the hard way, where I've tried to, fund people's education for them. I've tried to cut them breaks on qualification and I've done all kinds of things. Here's the thing. Every time I have went outside of the norm, every time I've tried to cut somebody a break, every time I've helped people through the process, they've never become star producers. You know who my star producers are? You know who the people are on my team that are really tearing it up? It's the people that had to strive and sacrifice and work just for the opportunity to come up with the funds to get started. The people who decided that they were going to change their story. It wasn't necessarily the people who had all the money or who had all the success. It instead was the people who decided that their story was no longer going to be that they were broke. Right? And oftentimes I share this story when I'm talking to people about funding, because it's a story that inspired me to keep looking when I was just getting turned down time and time again, trying to find the funding for my own education. So back when I started, folks, we didn't have the UGA program. We didn't have Get Funded Online. We didn't have, much of the ideas that we've come up with now for people to get funding for their education. Back then, it was literally like, hey, go print out your credit report and go talk to some banks. Go into some banks and shake some hands and find out what they can do for you. And that's what I did. And at first, worked out pretty easy. So I had, shortly before I got started, I had taken out a second mortgage on my home to do what people consider a debt consolidation loan, right? Which I think is one of the biggest traps for most people. Is, hey, come and consolidate your debt. Because when I consolidated my debt and I paid off all my credit cards and I paid off my car and I paid off, all those things and rolled it all into my house, which now obviously I'm extending that debt out 30 years. First of all, I'm paying 80 to 90% of my payment towards interest, right? But on top of that, I was stuck in a lifestyle where just because I paid off my credit cards didn't mean I didn't use them again, right? And so I went and I decided that I was going to get this education shortly after doing that. And so it was obviously this huge thing for me. And so I went and got more loans. I went and got a loan against my car, my bullet bike. raised limit on a credit card, but I was about $3,500 short of being able to fund my education. And so I had printed out my credit report. I went and got it from my bank that I had got a loan from. I said, yeah, can I get a copy of that? And I started going around to different banks, and I got turned down. No. I mean, 10 times in one day. I went to 10 different banks. I just went around and I showed them my credit report, and they really just all said no. I actually went back to my original credit union and said, is there anything you can do? And they said, well, we do have this unsecured loan, and based on your credit, we could give it to you, but we didn't want to tell you about it because it's almost 18% interest. And, we just don't think that that's a smart move for most people. And I said, well, give it to me, because this opportunity is going to provide me with the income, and that's going to change my life. I didn't exactly tell him that, but that's what I thought in my head. I just said, give it to me, right? Like, yes, I want that. What do I need to do? And that's what we did. That's what I made happen. So you guys can see that I had to strive for it. And it was because, the people that connected me to this opportunity, they didn't buy my story of being broke. They didn't tell me, oh, well, maybe if you only come up with, some of the money. They just said, here's what it is. And you got to make the decision that you're going to do it, and then figure out the how you're going to do it. And so as I was going through that process, I had met a girl, and she was in a situation where when she started, and one of my original mentors, Chad Wade, and Chad didn't enroll me in the business, but he's a guy that really took me under his wing. And Chad told this story about this girl, and then I ended up meeting her. And she was a single mom of 2. She was living in a 1-bedroom house that she was renting. And when she saw the opportunity here for this education, she knew that this was her path. And when Chad brought it to her, he was kind of thinking, hey, maybe she can just pay $125 and start marketing and work her way up. And, he was just new in the business himself. And so, he was kind of just talking to everybody, but he kind of prejudged this girl. He knew her, and, he cared about her and everything. She was a good friend, but he just figured, she's broke. He actually wrote the narrative for her in his own mind that she couldn't do it. And she surprised him, because when she, saw everything and she looked at the opportunity, she said, I want to do this. And he's thinking, okay, well, what do you mean by that? Does that mean that, you want to start marketing? You want to pay $125? She says, no, I'm buying all the education. I'm spending the $20,000. And she just said, I just need a little time. And he didn't know what in the world or how in the world. And he's like, does she have some rich uncle that I never knew about, or what was going on? And it turns out what she did was she just went and sold everything she had. She sold her beds. She sold her couches. She sold her jewelry. She sold literally all of her belongings that had any value, monetary value. She sold. And she actually moved out of that 1-bedroom house, and she moved back in with her mother into 1 bedroom of a house with her and her 2 boys. And it was because she had already changed the narrative in her own mind. She decided that this was the opportunity that was going to pull her towards who she always knew that she was, which was an excellent provider for her kids, which was, a millionaire real estate investor, and on, right? And so 2 years later, when I had met her, 2 years after she had started, when I had met her, she had over $5 million in real estate. And she went and bought that little 1-bedroom house that she was once renting, and she kept it as a rental property to remind her of where she came from. And it was because she changed the narrative in her own mind. Now, think about if Chad would have not allowed her to spend $20,000 because he cared so much and because he knew how tough her situation was. What if he sold her the story that she was broke? Or what if she had the story that she was broke and that he bought it? Folks, there's going to be people in your life that have this story that they've made up and that they've reinforced over 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years that they're broke. And if you buy it, if you sympathize with them and, try to cut them deals or try and, tell them, well, why don't you just get started with UGA at $425 at least, let's just start you there before you give them the opportunity to really go out there and make the decision that they're going to go all in. You have just reinforced their story of being broke. And if you reinforce that story of being broke, they're going to stick with it. They're going to continue to have it. It's the same thing if you've got IMAs on your team that have bought this story that marketing is hard, right? Or that they can't talk to people, or that they don't have a warm market, or that they, whatever the story is of why they're not succeeding. If you reinforce that story, if you buy their story, because at all times you are either selling or you are being sold. And so when an IMA comes to me, I can't guarantee that I'm going to sell them, but I can guarantee for myself that I'm not going to buy their story. So when an IMA comes to me and says, oh, this doesn't work, when they say that, real estate just, isn't what I thought it was, and you can't, it takes a lot more to find deals than I thought, and, yada, 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 then, it's not that I don't have compassion. I do. I realize you're changing your entire mindset. I have compassion for you, but that doesn't mean that I have sympathy, meaning that I'm going to reinforce it, right? I have compassion for where you're at, but that doesn't mean I have to buy your story. In fact, let me just tell you what the action steps are. Let me just ask you, what are you actually doing? And most of the time, they can't show me that they're doing jack squat. I mean, they'll tell me, oh, I've done this and I've done that. And when I really say, well, show me your numbers, like, what are you actually doing so that I can help you analyze it? They don't have any numbers. Well, I think, I talked to, probably this many people, whatever it is, right? And so instead of me buying their story and saying, you know what, you're right, maybe you should just go get a job for a while, and real estate, maybe when the market crashes next time, come back and revisit it. No. I say, look at Nate Lambert. He's doing a ton of real estate. Look at Mitch Nelson. Look at Brian Black. Look at, and I could go on and on and on, and I could just point to people that are doing real estate. Look at Tim Vreeland. Look at Matt Nelson. Look at Garrett Reed. Look at Stephen Tammy Nordforce. Look at, I could go on and on and on, and then if they have the story about the marketing business, I can do the same thing. I can say, look at this person, look at that person, look at this person, look at that person. I love that we're in the middle of EMT right now, because there's a whole bunch of people in EMT that are changing their story, right? That for months, possibly even years, they've not been making sales because they haven't been doing the work. And all of a sudden, they're forced to do the work. And within a very short amount of time, they've got people in the pipeline to buy education. So let me ask you, did the opportunity just become easier? Did they become wealthy all of a sudden? Did they become an excellent marketer all of a sudden? Or did they be forced into buying into a different story? See, if you right now have a story of being broke, you can choose whether you continue to reinforce that story, whether you continue to believe that story, or you can change the narrative. You can change what that story is, right? I remember when I was in a situation where I had, what do you call it? temporary, financial setback, right? But I wasn't reinforcing that I was broke. I was like, I'm a millionaire. The money's just catching up. And then I was doing the work to make sure that I was actually going to have it catch up with me, right? See, a lot of you are in this situation where you're looking at other people and you're saying, well, if I had the type of income that Christian Sadler has, then I would do the things that he does, and therefore I would be where, the type of person that he is. If I just had the real estate that Nate Lambert has, then I would do, the actions that he does. Then I would have the energy that he does. And therefore I would be the type of person he is. You got to flip that script. Guys, I'm not talking about fake it till you make it. I'm saying right now you have to decide who you are in advance. You've got to decide who you are and then live into it. You've got to change the story of, if your whole life has been hard, if you have all of these setbacks, if you've got all of this, outside stuff, then you get the opportunity to make a decision right now that none of that means anything. And who you decide you are is going to be who you be, and therefore you're going to do the things that will help you live into the person that you desire. So the first story that you got to buy is your own. And then the second thing, and this is something I really respect about Michael Huggins and Bob Snyder and many of our top leaders, is that they see people for who those people could be, not for who their circumstances say they are. So instead of seeing them as that person that has been broke their whole life, they see them as that person who is becoming successful. And when you buy that story, when you buy that story in your own mind for your prospects, if you sell it well enough, they're going to buy it too. And that's how you see people transform. That's how you see people that come into this business as the least likely, much like myself, and become the most likely. You see, folks, the reason I'm at where I'm at in this business, I believe, is because of the people. The people that believed in me oftentimes more than I believed in myself. So if right now you don't see yourself as successful, if you don't see yourself as a pit team member or a pack or a millionaire real estate investor, borrow my belief, because I know that if I can do this coming from where I came from, there isn't a single person on this line that can't do it too. I believe in your story of who you are becoming.